Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. On today's tutorial, I will demonstrate how to cut and sew a multiple layered dress for a little girl. This particular dress is for a 5-year-old girl. Hi, my name is Ayo and welcome to 011 Clothings Tutorials. On this channel, I upload DIYs, pattern drafting and sewing tutorials. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do so. And do not forget to turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. So now, let's get right into the tutorial. Thank you! These are the items that I will be working with. Tape measure, rulers and curves, 3 yards of African print fabric, and 3 yards of lining fabric. Water erasable fabric pencil, a pair of scissors, a long zip, pins, calculator, some interfacing. I will make use of the following measurements: shoulder to shoulder 9.5 inches, around chest 24 inches, shoulder to waistline 10.5 inches, around waist 22 inches, dress length 32 inches. I will cut out the front and the back bodies on this lining first. I will later use the lining pieces to cut out the bodies on the main fabric. So with the lining unfold, I will draw a horizontal starting line like this. I will start drafting the front bodies first. For the front neckline, I will use a value of 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. Using a French curve, I will go ahead and draw the front neckline curve like this. Next, I will divide the shoulder to shoulder measurement by 2, and this is 10.5 inches divided by 2, and this is equal to 5.25 inches. So on the upper starting line, I will measure and mark 5.25 inches like this, starting from the folded edge. I will come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope. I will now connect these 2 points together with a ruler like this. To know the armhole depth, I will divide the chest circumference measurement by 4, and this is 24 inches divided by 4, and this is equal to 6 inches. So from the upper starting line, I will measure and mark 6 inches like this. I will add half an inch for the seam allowance. I will now draw a horizontal line across like this. And this line is the armhole line. I will now draw a vertical line from the shoulder tip down to the armhole like this. Next, I will calculate the around chest plus 1 inch for ease divided by 4, and this is 24 plus 1 divided by 4, and this is equal to 6.25 inches. So on the armhole line, I will measure and mark 6.25 inches, starting from the folded edge of the lining fabric. I will add extra 1 inch to this for the side seam allowance. Using my French curve, I will now go ahead and draw the armhole curve like this. The half length, which is the shoulder to waistline measurement, is 10.5 inches. So from the starting line, I will measure and mark 10.5 inches, and I will add extra 1 inch to this for the seam allowance, and I will square a horizontal line across. This is the waistline. This half length measurement is taken from the nape down to 1 inch above the child's belly button. Next, I will calculate the waist circumference plus 1 inch for ease divided by 4, and this is 22 inches plus 1 divided by 4, and this is equal to 5.75 inches. So on the waistline, I will measure and mark 5.75 inches starting from the folded edge of the fabric. I will add extra 1 inch to this for the side seam allowance. I will now connect these 2 points together with my ruler like this. I did not add half an inch seam allowance to the tip of the shoulder, so I'll go ahead and extend the shoulders by half an inch like this. Then I will redraw the armhole curve like this using my French curve. I will now cut it out. Next, I will cut out the back bodice. With the lining on fold, I will measure and mark 1 inch for the zip allowance at the back of the dress. I will now pin the front bodice in place, making sure that the folded edge, the center front, aligns with the vertical line that I drew for the zip allowance. I will use 1 inch for the back neck depth and I will draw the back neckline curve. I will now cut out the back bodice like this. Next, I will go ahead and use the lining pieces to cut out the bodice on the main Ankara fabric. So now the cutting has been done on the Ankara fabric and I've fused interfacing to the neckline of all the pieces. It is now time to cut the skirt part of the dress. To know the length of the skirt, it is the full length of the dress minus the length of the bodice. The length of the dress is 32 inches. The length of the bodice is the shoulder to waistline measurement, which is 10.5 inches. This is 32 inches minus 10.5 inches and this is equal to 21.5 inches. And this is approximately 22 inches. The dress has 5 layers of flounce. The length of the skirt is 22 inches. So the length of each layer of flounce will be 22 inches divided by 5 and this is equal to 4.4 inches. One layer of the flounce will be fixed to the hem of the underlay lining piece. So I will subtract 4.4 inches from 22 inches, which is the original length of the skirt, and this is equal to 17.6 inches. This is the lining fabric that I will use to cut out the underlay lining. The flounce will be sewn to this underlay lining. So I will fold the lining on bias in a triangular way like this. At the upper part of the triangular fold, I will look for that point that will accommodate the waist circumference plus 1 inch for ease divided by 4 and this is equal to 5.75 inches plus some extra allowance for the seam allowance. Once I'm able to locate the point, I will square a horizontal line across and this will be the starting line for the skirt. When drawing the horizontal line, I will make sure that the short edge of the ruler aligns with the folded edge of the fabric. On the horizontal line, I will measure and mark 5.75 inches plus extra 1 inch for the side seam allowance. I will come down by half an inch at the folded edge. I will now use the half an inch as a guide to curve the horizontal line like this using my French curve. The length of the lining that I estimated earlier is 17.6 inches. I will now go ahead to measure and mark 17.6 inches plus extra 1 inch for seam allowance from the upper starting line downwards like this. I will now connect the waist to the hem like this. At this point, you can adjust the fullness of the skirt to suit your taste. I will now cut it out, and this is the front skirt piece. Next, I will cut out the back skirt pieces. So I will fold the lining fabric on bias like this. I will place the front skirt piece, which I've already cut out, on it like this, and I will pin it in place. I will add 1 inch to the center back of the skirt pattern for the zip allowance. I will now cut it out using the front piece as a guide. Now I have gone ahead to cut 2 skirt lining pieces for the front of the dress and 4 skirt lining pieces for the back of the dress. One piece will be for the underlay, where I will fix the 5 layers of flounces, and the remaining piece will be for the original lining, for the actual lining of the dress. I have gone ahead to draw the guidelines where I will be sewing the flounce layers to the underlay lining pieces. I will set aside the back pieces for now. On the front lining piece, I will measure out the width of each of the guidelines that I drew on the lining. For the first layer, the width is 14.5 inches. For the second layer, the width is 17.5 inches. For the third layer, the width is 20.5 inches. For the fourth layer, the width is 23.5 inches. For the fifth layer, I will measure the lower edge of the lining. And this gave me a value of 26 inches. Since I'm going to gather the flounces, so what I will do is to multiply each of the 5 measurements by 1.5. So I'll multiply all these values by 1.5. You can also multiply these values by 2 or by 3. It depends on the fullness you want for the flounces and of course the quantity of fabric that you are working with. So now I have gone ahead to multiply each of the 5 measurements by 1.5, as you can see. Each of the flounces will be gathered. For the length of the flounce, I will divide the length of the skirt, which is 22 inches by 5, since we have 5 flounce layers, and this is equal to 4.4 inches. So the length of the flounce is 4.4 inches plus 3 inches. The extra 3 inches is for the seam allowance and the overlap of one layer over the other, and this is equal to 7.4 inches. So the length of the first 4 flounce layers is 7.4 inches. As for the fifth layer, I will only add extra 1.5 inches to the 4.4 inches, and this is because the fifth and the final layer is not overlapping or covering up any other layer, and this is equal to 5.9 inches. So these are the 2 back pieces. So I've gone ahead to measure out the width of each of the guidelines, and I've also multiplied each value by 1.5 inches by 1.5, just like I did for the front. The length of the flounces will remain the same for the front flounces. I will use the same length for the first 4 layers, which is 7.4 inches, and for the fifth layer I will use a value of 5.9 inches. I will cut 2 pieces each for the back flounce pieces. So now I have gone ahead to do the cutting, following the exact measurements that I calculated earlier. These are the front pieces, and I've already labeled each of the flounce layers as 1F, 2F, 3F, 5F so as to avoid confusion while sewing. These are the back flounce pieces. I cut 2 pieces for each of the flounce layers. I also labeled each of the flounce layers as 1B, 2B, 3B and so on, so as to avoid confusion while sewing. I will use this fabric to cut out the 2 belt pieces. So I will fold the fabric into 4 layers like this. At the lower end, I will draw a starting line like this. From this point, I will measure out the full length of the belt, which is 27 inches. I will draw a horizontal line across like this. On the upper end, I will measure and mark 2.5 inches for the width of the belt at the upper part. At this lower end, I will go up by 2 inches. Then I will measure and mark 3.5 inches for the width of the belt at the lower end of the belt. I will now connect these 2 points together with my ruler like this. I will also connect these 2 points together with a ruler. I will now cut it out. These are the sleeves for the dress. The link to the tutorial on how to cut this will be above and in the description box below. Now I'm done with the cutting. I will now proceed with sewing the pieces together. These are the bodice pieces, both the lining and the main fabric. I will now place the lining pieces on top of the main fabric pieces, right side to right side, for both the front and the back pieces. I will paint the neckline and I will go ahead and stitch the necklines on my sewing machine using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done. I have joined both the lining and the main fabric together at the necklines. After stitching, I notch the seam allowances and then I understitch the seam allowances to the neckline of the lining fabric. Next, I will join the front and the back pieces together at the shoulders. So I will open up the shoulders like this. I will pin in place, making sure that the shoulder seam lines match up. Once I'm done pinning, I will take it to my sewing machine and I will stitch in place using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see, and I've pressed open the seam allowances. These are the back flounce pieces and I've gone ahead to hem the lower edges of the flounce pieces and I've also gathered the upper edges of the flounce pieces. These are the front flounce pieces. I have also done the same thing for these pieces as well. I have hemmed the lower end and also gathered the upper part of all the 5 flounce pieces for the front. I will bring out the 5th flounce piece for the front. I will pin it to the lower edge of the underlay lining piece, right side to right side. I will stitch in place on my sewing machine using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see. I will now go ahead to measure and mark 1 inch at both sides of the lining underlay piece on each of the guidelines. I will now go ahead and pin the fourth flounce piece on the underlay lining piece, right side to right side, following the guideline which I have already drawn on the lining. I will stitch in place using half an inch sewing allowance. I will leave out 1 inch that I marked out on both sides of the lining. I will do the same thing for the third and the second flounce layers as well. So now I have sewn the flounce pieces to the underlay lining, as you can see. I left out 1 inch on both sides of the lining that I did not sew. At the upper part, I will also measure and mark 1 inch at both sides of the lining like this. I will now place the first flounce piece on top of the lining like this. I will go ahead and stitch it in place using 1/4 of an inch sewing allowance on my sewing machine. I will also leave out 1 inch at both sides. These are the back underlay lining pieces. I will now go ahead and fix the flounce pieces to the underlay lining just like I did for the front. This is the front piece, and I'll fix the last flounce piece, as you can see, and I left out 1 inch at both sides that I did not sew. These are the 2 back pieces, and I'll fix the 5 flounce layers to the underlay lining pieces, as you can see. I also left out 1 inch on both sides of the underlay lining pieces for each of the flounce layers. I will now place the 2 back pieces on top of the front piece like this, right side to right side. I will pin the front and the back underlay pieces together, pushing the flounce pieces out of the way. Remember that I left 1 inch at both sides of the lining, which I did not sew. I will now go ahead and sew the front and the back lining pieces together at the sides using 1 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see. You can go ahead and overlock the raw edges now if you have an overlocker. As you can see, the flounces at the side seams are still separate. So I'll go ahead and sew the front and the back flounce pieces together at the side using 1 inch sewing allowance. Right sides will be together. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see. This is the second lining piece for the front. I will now place the two back lining pieces on top of the front piece like this, right side to right side. I will go ahead and sew the side seams together using 1 inch sewing allowance. I will also hem the lower part. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see, and I've hemmed the lower part of the lining. These two pieces are the belt of the dress. I will now fold them into two like this, right sides together. I will now go ahead and stick them in place using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done, and I've turned the two belt pieces to the right side and I've given them a thorough press. I will now measure and mark 3/4 inch above the hem of the bodice on both sides like this. I will now pin the belt in place to the side seam 3/4 inch above the hem of the bodice. I will baste in place on my sewing machine using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done. I will now go ahead and sew the front and the back side together using 1 inch sewing allowance. I will be sewing fabric to fabric and lining to lining. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see. I will now bring out the skirt piece. I will pin the skirt and the bodice together, fabric to fabric and lining to lining, making sure that the side seam lines match up. Right sides are also together. I will stitch in place on my sewing machine using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see. I will now push the main lining out of the way. I have already notched the point where I want the zip to end at the center back, and this is about 5 inches below the waistline. I will now pin the underlay lining pieces together at the center back. Right sides are together. I will push the flounce pieces out of the way. I will take it to my sewing machine and I will stitch in place using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see, but the flounce pieces at the center back are still separate. So I will go ahead and stick them together using 1 inch sewing allowance. Right sides are together. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see. As for this first flounce, I will transfer the point where the zip opening is supposed to end on the lining. I will transfer it to the flounce like this using my pencil, my fabric pencil. I will notch the point. I will now stitch the flounce together from the notched point down to the hem of the flounce using 1 inch sewing allowance. So now the stitching has been done. The stitching has been done, as you can see. I will baste the underlay lining and the flounce together at this side. I will baste both pieces together at this side. I will also do the same thing at the other side as well. I will now go ahead and fix the zip. So the first thing I will do is to change the regular machine foot into a zipper foot. I left 1 inch opening at the center back neckline, and I've already marked out the 1 inch zip allowance at the center back of the dress. I will now open up the zip like this, and I will go ahead and fix the zip to the center back of the dress following the 1 inch guideline that I've already drawn at the center back of the dress. So now I have fixed the zip to the center back of the dress, as you can see. I will now turn the dress to the wrong side. I will sew the 1 inch opening at the center back neckline. I will measure where the zip ends on the main dress from the waistline downwards. I will now transfer it to the lining like this. From this point, I will measure and mark 1 inch down to the hem of the lining. I will now go ahead and stitch it in place on my sewing machine. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see. I have also already sewn the 1 inch opening at the center back necklines. So with the right sides together, I will go ahead and sew the lining at the center back to the center back of the main fabric, very close or on top of the same stitch line that was used to fix the zip. So I will go ahead and do that now. I will also use a zipper foot for the stitching. So now the stitching has been done, as you can see. See how neat the finishing of the dress is on the wrong side. And this is what the zip looks like on the right side. These are the two sleeve pieces. I'll go ahead and hem the lower part of the sleeve. After hemming, I will sew it together at the side seam, right side to right side. Then I will now fix the sleeves to the armholes of the dress. So now that has been done, as you can see, and this is the final look of the multiple layered dress. If you find this video helpful, do not forget to give it a thumbs up. Drop a comment down below, share this video with your friends who are interested in sewing, and do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. See you in my next tutorial. Bye, and thank you so much for watching.